Hi everyone, my name is Phil and welcome to PhilDoes3D. I'm a multimedia and 3D artist and I stream on Twitch weekdays from 5 PM Pacific time in the US, at 4 PM now that you guys have finished with daylight saving, 11 AM in Australia and 12 AM in the UK. Thanks for the host, Galen. Good to see you back. How's things? Let's just open up our file we were working on yesterday, the garden terrace. Always good to see you in chat, Galen. Just checking my stream is still running and everything seems fine. Looks good. Did you end up streaming last night, Galen? I couldn't watch, unfortunately. I had to go to bed, but how was the stream if you did? Come on, Max. And I always appreciate your support. You're always in chat, which is great, and you host my channel on your channel, so that's cool of you as well. Oh, you streamed Eve, cool. Okay. Let's go full screen on this, I think. I caught your message at the end of the stream last night about the Tree of Life, and that's exactly what it is. Let me just isolate that and you can get a better look at it. Yeah, it's the Tree of Life. I thought it was fitting considering the garden terrace theme and being outside. Thought it would fit well. Okay. So yesterday we textured up these banister railings all the way around the outside. So we've only got one of those left to do now, and that's the large one at the back of the terrace here. This one, which we'll have to do individually because of the difference in the UV layout and the number of objects. So thanks. Yeah, I thought I'd dirty it up a bit. You know me, with this I always like to make sure it's nice and dirty. I may bring up the color on it a little bit in Photoshop, but I'll wait till I finish texturing up the rest of the model and I'll look at it overall and decide whether it needs a bit of a lift me up, a bit of a pick up in color. Let's isolate these back section and we'll ungroup them. And then we'll attach them. Okay. And let's go back into our main viewport. Now, what do we call these ones? We call these ones small columns. I'll call this one SML columns, and I'll just call it back. All right, let's do what we normally do. We'll go into our material editor. We'll find our standard gray that we apply to everything before we texture it up, and that's this one here. So I'm just going to assign that to the selection. I'm going to throw on a standard cube UV map, or box in Max's terminology. Alright, now we'll throw an unwrap UVW on. We're going to go into map channel 2. We'll move the UVs across. I will open the UV editor. And we're going to do a flatten mapping on this. I know Max sometimes has problems with this flattened mapping, so I'm just going to give it a go. We'll see how we go. Sometimes with complex geometry, if you try and do an automatic flattened map, Max will, sometimes it'll crash, sometimes it'll just have problems trying to work out what it's doing. If that happens, you can get around the problem generally by either selecting, in this case, one column and doing it individually. Generally, Max will be okay that way. So if you can't do an unwrap on the complete object at once, then try doing an unwrap on individual sections of the model. Max has gotten better with Max 2017 than it used to be with this automatic unwrapping. But there are still occasions where it won't like it, or it'll have problems working it out. You don't have to do your unwrapping in Max, of course. You can do it in a third-party program. I've got two that I use. Heaters UV Layout, which is a separate program just for UVW mapping. And Unfold3D, I think, is the other one that I use. They're just, all you do there is export your model as an OBJ and unwrap it in the external program, then re-import your model and load the UVs, copy them across using the channel info in Utilities tab in Max. That's just an option for you if you don't want to use the built-in tools that come with your 3D software. The 3D software has generally gotten better though with its unwrapping now. It's incorporated a lot of the stuff that third-party tools used to use. So, and hey, if you can do it within the program, it's always much more convenient than using a third-party program. Of course, you can do it all by hand as well if you really want to do it that way. Not something I personally like doing. It takes a lot of time and it's very fiddly. So Max is still going down here. It seems to be working out the clusters at the moment. Like I said, the more complex the object, naturally, the longer it's going to take for Max to work out the unwrap. So be patient. There we go. I'm just going to turn off our seams because I don't like the way it highlights my object like that. I can't see what I'm working on. Gives you fit scaling. Yeah, I know what you mean. It's probably the thing I like least in 3D modeling is doing UVW mapping. You know, you got to do it generally. Although you have PTEX textures now, which is trying to move away from UVW mapping. I haven't done much with that yet myself in PTEX. Yeah, if it's a complex object or it's an object where you're going to be using a lot of normal maps, you've really got to pay attention to the seams because particularly with normal maps, they're going to show up in your model if the seam is in the wrong spot. So if you have the seam running down the middle of your object, even though you may not see it in the bitmap, in the color map, as soon as you put a normal map on it, you're going to notice it. So yeah, you've got to try and hide the seams. That's really important with character work, particularly if they hide the seams under the arms, along the back of the neck, so that it's not quite so noticeable. Yeah, normal maps particularly, you've really got to watch what you're doing with normal mapping because it'll show up a seam. Okay, so we've done that. Now we're going to do a render to texture. So if we go to render to texture, we're going to use our existing channel 2 that we just created, and we're going to add a diffuse map. Again, I'm going to make these 2K, so 2048. Let's set our path to our rework folder we've been working in all along. So, and small column back is fine. I don't want diffuse map put on the end of it, and so saving it as a target file. .tga. Again, you can use any format that you like. Galen likes to use PNG, and that's perfectly fine as well. You can use JPEG if you like, but Targa and PNG are lossless, so you won't lose any information in the texture map, and then you can always convert it to JPEG later on in another program. That's what I'd recommend you do. I'd recommend you stick with a program that's lossless for your original models, and then convert them later on when you start distributing the model or sending it on to somebody else. Okay, so we have our map channel, our diffuse map, our path, and our texture size. We're going to render. Max is just complaining I haven't told it what map slot I want to put it in. I don't want it to put it in a map slot. I'll do it myself. And again, this texture is just our color, just our base color, so that when we take it into Mari, we have a better view of the model. Okay, we can close that down. I have my object selected. I'm just going to export it. So export selected. Again, I'm going to jump into my rework folder, and we're going to be saving it as an OBJ file. We'll call it small column back, and we'll export it. Okay, let's just deselect that for a moment, and I'm just going to get our shader ready so that when we come back from Mari we can pop it on. So I'm going to jump down to the end of my stack here. As I said, I always work my way down. That way I know the last thing I worked on is at the bottom of the stack. We're going to throw on a standard material and a bitmap. Back in our rework folder. And we're calling this one small column back. It's this one just here. All right, let's double click that and pipe that into our diffuse channel. And we'll turn on show shaded and show realistic. Okay. We're going to assign that. Actually, we should have done that before we exported, but I'll do it right now. Let's just find our model here, our object, and select it and assign the material to it. Okay, now we're going to go into our utilities tab in our channel info and copy those UVs across. I know some of you who have been watching my channel have seen me do this 1,000 times, but this is for the benefit of anyone that might be new. I'm going to clear out channel 2. Okay, now we're going to re-export it again. You should always do that before you do the export. My bad. So back into OBJ, small columns back. Because you want Mari to be working with the new UV set, not the old one. So it's an easy thing to forget to do. So if when you're painting in Mari you're not getting the result you want, it's probably because you forgot to copy your UVs across. So let's jump into Mari and create a new project. We're going to call it small columns back. We're going to load up that OBJ we just exported from Max. Rework folder. Small columns back, that's the one there. I'm just going to change my temp directory because I don't want to use my main C, my SSD drive. I use a regular hard drive for my temp folder. And we're going to create a color map at 2K. Okay. When you're streaming next, Galen, I'll try and watch your next stream. Okay, wait for it. We'll go into flat shaded mode so I can see the model a little bit better. And I'm just going to import that that render to texture we made in Max onto the model. So again, we're going to go into our rework folder. Again, it defaults to TIFF. That's just a something that Murray does. So just pop a star in there to see everything in your folder. We're looking for small columns back, that one just there. You stream 6 days a week. Geez, I don't know how you do it. I stream 3 and I find it exhausting sometimes. 6 days, that's good on you for keeping up that sort of schedule. Jeez, I couldn't do 6, I couldn't. Between the streaming and then formatting doing all my video work for my streams and putting them on all social media and things, it takes a lot of time. I don't know how you do 6 days. Okay. Let's import some texture maps to use. Textures, that's what I want. Aged and stressed. I'm working generally with the same set of texture maps I use for the rest of the Terrace, again to keep everything consistent. All that streaming, all that game playing and all that rendering, I don't know how you find the time, dude. I really don't. Let's open that up. And I'll pull in one more texture folder as well, which is my dirt and grime folder. Oh, right. Yeah, it's always a problem with weather and the internet. Or weather and anything in general, actually. Even I have a cable TV subscription, but it's via satellite, and it also affects that satellite signal when the weather is really bad. Generally clouds, like really thick cloud, will cut out the satellite signal. Okay, let's pull in our dirt folder, which is this one here. Okay. And again, for anyone that's new, Mari doesn't actually load these textures up. You're just loading a pointer to the file. So don't worry about using up your computer memory in Mari. It doesn't actually physically load the textures into the program. Remember, guys, if you've got any questions for me or anything you don't understand that I'm doing, feel free to pop into chat and ask me. You can pop into chat and say hello, just to say hi if you want. If you just want to watch, then that's completely fine too. Okay, so we have our textures loaded up. We've got our masking on, as we can see by this red outline. I'm actually going to turn masking off just at this stage to do the initial base texturing. And I'm going to load up my model, orient my model correctly, and I just pressed the number 3 key on my keyboard to get a front viewport. Is that a front? No, yes, that's a front. So I'm just going to zoom in by hitting the Alt key and the right mouse button until the model just fits that window. Okay, I'm going to throw on a new layer. That way, if we do anything we don't like, we can easily remove it. And I'm going to grab that texture we've been using for these columns, which is this one here. And again, I'm going to scale the texture down by hitting the Control and Shift key and the left mouse button until it just covers the model. And as I said, it's important at this stage not to scale the model or scale the texture while you're doing this base texture work, because you want to keep it all consistent. So we're just going to paint that in, and this will help make sure that the moss and lichen growing on this matches the other columns that we have. It just means you're going to have to move your texture along as you paint, and don't move it directly like that, because you want to make sure that the columns all look a little different. So say I'm working on these two here. I'm not going to line it up so that starts at the edge of that column, because that'll make it similar to, it'll paint on a texture that looks identical to this one. So I'm just going to move the texture in a bit like that before I start painting on it. And that'll just help vary up the texture as you paint it down. It won't look quite so, it won't look like you're repeating the pattern along. Okay, I'm just going to hit the Alt key to bake that down, because remember, it's not actually physically assigned to the UVs until you hit the Alt key. All right, let's start around the middle for this one. So just off from the middle, I think. Actually, I think like that for this one. I'm just looking at the previous columns and making sure I don't have any patterns popping up that people will notice. And even if you do, it's easier to paint over it to remove any pattern that looks like it's repeating that you notice. Like at the top there, you see that that moss that's growing. That looks very similar to that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to choose a part of the texture that doesn't have anything on it and paint over that area. That way, you won't notice that we're using the same texture constantly. Okay. I think we'll go with this one here. This one here. Again, I'm going to remove that moss in the middle there, because this one is looking too much like this one. And also at the bottom here, I'm also going to remove some of the moss. Okay, let's go with another darker colored one on this one, more dirty at the top. Press the Alt button to bake it down. Okay. And these last two here on the end. And again, I'm noticing a pattern between this one and this one here. So I'm just going to remove the parts of the texture that look like that you can notice that are repeating. And the one on the end, I might go with a bit of dirt on the top again, I think. And then I'll just vary the texture towards the base a bit more. So I will paint out some of the lichen through here. And bake that down. Okay, let's swing it around to the opposite side. Again, we're going to line it up. And we'll just repeat that again. Now I have masking turned off, so we are going to get some stretching happening along the sides, but we're going to fix that up by hand. Alright, let's go with that texture there, I think. And maybe that one through there. Okay, let's go with through here, I think. And maybe some dark on the top of it just here. And again, I'm going to hit the Alt key to back it down. All right, let's go with maybe through here. Now I'm noticing this is the same as the second column, so I'm just going to vary it up a bit more. Just through here and maybe a bit up here on the top. You can actually add some dark spots if you think that would look good for your texture. You can vary it up that way as well. You don't have to paint white in, you can paint in some of the more detailed area. Okay, let's go with this here and just remove that bit of lichen that's at the top, I think, and a bit here at the bottom. We'll back that down. Again, people are generally, they're not going to be looking that closely at these columns, but if there's anything you notice, like that's very similar to the first one here, it's really noticeable, then you may as well make it a bit more variable. And these last two here on the end, I think I'll go with a bit of the dark on the top on this one here. And we'll go with more of a white on the one on the end, I think. Okay, let's bake that down. And now you see what I mean by it stretching along the sides a little bit. We're just going to have to touch that up by hand. So I'm just going to, no, I did zoom in there, so I'm going to have to match that up with the texture here. Okay. Luckily, this texture is quite has a lot of going on, a lot of detail in it, so blending it together is not going to be too hard. Just fiddly. And I actually am going to zoom in a bit closer because I want to get a better view of the sides of this model. Another way to do this, of course, will be for us to jump into our UV view, and we can paint it in that way. If you find it easier to do it that way, then that's certainly a way to do it as well. I'll just show you what I mean by doing a few here. Just make sure you get the scale correct on your texture, that's all. And it may be better with these type of models. Let me just break that down. Where they're quite close to each other and you're going to have a bit of a problem getting in there to paint. If you jump into the UV view, you can generally fix it up that way. And you'll see quite easily in the UV view here the areas that need to be touched up. Like I said, it's just making sure you match the scale. That's the most important thing, the scale of the texture, that is. And again, I just move around by holding down the Alt key and the right mouse button, same as I do in the 3D viewport. And I'm sticking to mainly the white part of the texture map we're using to paint in these side areas. Alt key to break it down. So yeah, I'm mainly using this white section, less of these detailed sections here. You'll find it easier to blend with the underlying texture that way. We have a few to do just because we have two sides of the column itself to paint out, so there'll be a few in here that we need to touch up. If you do paint in some of the dark, it doesn't matter, it'll still work. Hit the Alt key to bake that down. Let's move that over a bit. We don't have to worry so much about repeating the texture here because it's on the inside of the columns themselves. So it won't be obvious to anyone. Okay, make that in. I think we're almost there. There's only a few more left to go. We'll bake that down by hitting the Alt key. This one just here. Still be careful you don't stay within the UV island. Don't go too nuts here. Just be a little bit careful you stay within that texture space that you're painting. Take that down. This is the same way we did the rings on the top of the dome. If you remember, we used the UV because it was easier to get into these nooks and crannies that way. Just having a quick look, there's just a couple down here that still need to be done. Now, again, it's important to follow the grain of the texture you're painting. So on the ones that are vertical, we're using the texture the way that we painted it in the 3D viewport, but these ones that are UV'd horizontally, we're going to rotate our texture around. And again, from the edge here, so we have more control. It's just important to keep the direction that you're painting the texture in consistent. I'm just going to pull in a little bit more on this to keep our scale right. So yeah, just a few things to bear in mind when you're doing UV texture painting or any sort of texturing work. Make sure that if you've rotated your UVs, that you rotate your texture to match. Okay, just a few more down here. And this one here. Bake that down by hitting the Alt key. Okay, there's one over here. I think we may have them all now. Let me just double check. Looks like it. Let's jump back into the 3D viewport and have a look. Alright, now the only bit of stretching we have left is these edges here. So again, we'll fix that up in the UV map view. And I'm just going to zoom in a bit. We'll work our way down. Now, I know that these large ones are the tops and the bottoms of the column, and they're not going to be seen at all in the model because there's the banister railing that goes all the way around the outside touches both the top and the bottom, so I'm not going to texture them up. there's no point. They're not going to be seen. But I know that these side pieces do, so let's just fix those up really quick. Back it down. Now I'm going to, that's fine. I'm just making sure that my texture direction is matching, and it does on these, but I don't think it will on the one that I painted above it, so I'll fix that up in a minute. Let me just think about this for a minute. Yeah, no, that's right. It's the right direction. That's cool. Just making sure that my texture map is rotated correctly, and it is for these ones. And again, I'm working with more of the white part of the texture than the dirty or coloured part. And the reason I did a flatten mapping in Max is to give each UV island a unique texture set. If you're not doing 3D work like this where you're painting on the model, and you're doing maybe your texturing in Photoshop, you can sometimes get away with overlapping your UV maps, like particularly if you work with symmetry mode in your 3D program, you can overlay two UV islands on top of each other that share the same texture. And that's a good way to maximize your texture space and resolution without having to increase the texture size. But because I'm working in a 3D view here, painting on a 3D model, each part of the UV that makes up that model has to be in its own section, its own island. If I overlaid the UVs like you can do sometimes, when I paint on one, it's going to paint the same texture on the other side, and I don't want that. So, but you can certainly overlay your UVs on some models in Photoshop and do it that way if you want to save yourself some time on some work. And again, in game development, they do that quite a bit because they're limited with their texture size that they can use for their models, and they want to get the biggest bang per buck with the texture size that they're using, the highest quality render texture that they can with the limited memory that they have available with the game development, with the game engine. Less of a problem these days than it used to be, but it used to be a very big problem back in the day with, maybe the Xbox 360, for instance, when I was working on a game with that for that console. It had limited memory that you could use, so like texture sizes generally couldn't be much bigger than 1024. Otherwise, the machine would run out of memory, and you need to keep the programmers need to keep memory aside for the code to run and all that sort of thing. So less of a problem these days, though, of course, because consoles now have like 8 gigabytes of memory. So, but it's still, good to optimize your model for game development as much as you can, even with a lot of texture space now. Take that down. I'm mainly looking at this stage for the ones that are running vertically. I'll do the horizontal ones in a minute. Okay, let's do this one here. And again, this is going to be the most fiddly part because it's the underlying texture. When we put the dirt map over the top of it, it won't be quite as fiddly as this. We can do it in the 3D viewport without too much of a problem. Okay. All right, there's a couple in here. Bake that down. Couple just up the top here, or one of them at least up the top here. I'll bake it down. Alright, I think we have all of the vertical ones now. Let's work on the horizontal, and again I'm going to rotate my texture around. Bake that down by hitting the Alt key. I'll start at the top and work my way down. I think that's probably the most sensible way to do it. Okay. Let's bake it down by hitting the Alt key. All right, there's a couple in here. We'll bake that down. There's one in here. There's just a few in here. Some of them are okay, not all of them need to be fixed. Generally the ones that are okay will be the ones that were on the outside of the model when we were painting it up. These ones that have the stretching will be the ones that were on the more towards the middle of the model. Okay, let's bake that down. This one just here. Bake it down. How many do we have left now? I think we may have got them all. Let's zoom out a bit so I get a bit an overview of the UV layout. And I think that might be good. Can't see anything jumping out at me that needs to be redone. Let's jump back into our 3D view. Alright, I think we're good. Okay. Now I'm going to press the 3 key to go back into the front view and just scale the model up. I'm going to throw on a new layer. And I am going to turn masking back on now, because I don't want stretching happening on the sides when I'm painting the dirt map on the front and the back. I'm also just going to save my file very quickly.